On completion of 11 years of Mr. Narendra Modi's government in power, I am joined by today somebody who is not just a politician, not also a civil servant and politician, but also somebody who has donned many hats. Mr. Puri, welcome to NDTV. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you.
And let me begin by asking you, one question would be on the top of every viewer's mind, and that would be that this is a historic, we are witnessing history in making. This is only in the second time in the history of independent India that a Prime Minister has been chosen for the third straight term. How do you think India has changed in these 11 years?
Well, that question can be responded to in many ways. How has India changed? One, you can cite empirical evidence in terms of numbers. It was a $2 trillion economy in 2014. 11 years later, as we embark on Modi 3.0 in the second year, it's a $4.3 trillion economy, more than doubled. But I don't think these numbers tell the full story. The full story has two other components. One, that you've come from being the 11th or 10th largest economy to the 4th largest economy, and you are now looking to be the 3rd largest economy with a rate of growth which is very different from the people you are competing with. Because Japan and Germany, the country you've overtaken, and Germany, the country you will overtake, they are not growing at that rate. Our last quarter rate of growth was 7.5% or thereabouts. And we are expected to grow at 6.5% plus. So even if you just look at growing the economy, you're going to be the 3rd largest economy in a year's time or a year and a half's time. But I think the second and more important component of this Modi story is it's not just growth. It is the all-round benefit, something that the UN tried to capture in the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, which Modi ji had done prior to, because he assumed the mantle in 2014. So after the conceptualization of those schemes, what was rolled out in terms of central schemes in June 2015 all have that component. Let me take women's empowerment. The Swachhta campaign is very important. Not in terms of the number of toilets you built, well, 12 crores or 13 crores individual household toilets, 5 or 6 crores community or public toilets. No, it's in something more. You converted a government scheme into a project of the people, but you gave dignity to the girl child. The girl child doesn't have to go into the field every morning to defecate, okay? Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, look, it was a very, very intelligently done thing. Land is a state subject. Somebody could have turned around as our opposition, I don't want to take name, ये कैसे कर रहे हैं? अरे भाई तुम भी तो सरकार में थे. मोदी जी के तो अभी 11 साल पहले 11 साल आए, आपने भी तो योजनाएं चलाई थी. एक राजीव गांधी आवास योजना भी थी, उसके आप टोटल फिगर्स देखिए. Never took off. Here you built 4 crore homes if you take a combination of the rural and the urban, or even more. And you decided you want to build another 3 crore. By 4 crores is 40 million, 3 crores is 30 million. Just imagine if in the Modi 3 terms together you get 70 million homes built. भाई कई देशों की जनसंख्या इससे एक fraction होती है. But the more important story, the title is in the name of the lady of the house. That is what makes it. Ujjwala again is one of my favorite stories. Not so much because of the number of connections. They were
much because you implemented it?
No. I inherited it from someone. Look, I'll be very clear. No. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana I dealt with 7 years. No, I never point out those things because I was associated. Look, when I was a student in the university, which I suspect before you were born, to get a telephone connection or a gas cylinder was a rarity. Absolutely rarity. Most of our mothers and everybody, you had those pump stoves using kerosene, etc. When Modi ji assumed responsibility, 14 crore cylinder the. And essentially, my friend, they were 14 crore urban connections. Now you've got 33 crores. And when Ujjwala came along in my predecessor's time in 2016, there's got 10 crores. 80% of those are rural. The point I'm saying is Modi ji's India saw growth, but those growth was accompanied by a distribution and the percolation of the benefits of development right down to the grassroots level. every person in the most far-flung area has a mobile phone. If you look at connectivity, look at, apart from railways, etc., air connectivity, we have the third largest urban metro system in the world, and we are going to be the second largest metro. We're going to overtake the United States. We have 1,000 kilometers under construction. We have 950 kilometers operational. Healthcare. Look, the one thing I noticed, I was a civil servant for 39 years.
I was coming to that.
I was 39 years, so I've seen other governments also. You have a prime minister who never hesitates to take advantage of a challenge that we face, and he converts it into an opportunity. Energy is a case in point. Oh my God, the whole world was in turmoil. What? But he changed policies. We have 3.5 million square kilometers of sedimentary basin. 1 million square kilometer was no-go area. He opened it up. Today we have a legislation which incorporates the best practices of all the global legislation. And today I can say with confidence that you have a discussion on energy anywhere in the world, India will figure in it. Not only because it's a large consumer, it's a large producer, large importer, but also a large exporter. So today, your automobile industry, your civil aviation, and I tell you, it's only a matter of time where you will now move from the narrative of competing for the third position. I know the gap between the third and the second large economies is very large, but I think you've got all the ingredients in Modi 3.0 before its mandate ends in 2029 and even 2029 and beyond. You will be competing for the big space.
Mr. Puri, before I come to the fact that you have been a civil servant for almost close to 4 decades, and that's why you have seen many other governments from close quarters, actually worked with them, let me ask you this question, since you mentioned opposition. Your opposition, your government takes pride, and many neutral observers would say, rightly so, in pulling out close to 25 crore people out of abject poverty.
That is a very, very important, multidimensional poverty.
Yeah, abject poverty, as United Nations would call it. Let me ask you this then, that the opposition, your government takes pride in pulling out those people out of poverty. The opposition says, however, the opposition says that your government has been for the rich and your government has only benefited the corporates or the rich, in the sense that the lower middle classes have not benefited. How do you see that criticism as?
I'm known for restraint in language, but even I'm allowed to have fun sometimes. In the Westminster style, when you refer to the opposition, you refer to His Majesty's opposition. हमारे यहाँ भी कुछ होना चाहिए, because if you say your opposition, मुझे तो कभी कभी मेरी opposition, that मेरा word उनके साथ और our word उनके साथ जोड़ के थोड़ी वो क्या कहते हैं hesitation होती है. I just extracted from you that the government has lifted 250 million people out of what you call abject poverty in the UN line, or what we call multidimensional poverty. ये कौन थे? These are the rich friends of the government who were lifted out. When we provide 10 crore, 30 lakh Ujjwala connections to the poorest of the poor, Ujjwala की qualification के लिए 8 या 9 indices हैं, जिसमें सबसे गरीब वो economically weaker section below poverty line है, किनको दे रहे हैं? So मैं आपको ऐसे कई उदाहरण दे सकता हूँ. But what gets my goat is, if you look at the history of the people who make the allegation, and if you just take out what is available in the history books or on social media on them, they should think twice. कौन किसका दोस्त है? I am not aware in the Modi government's 11 years of any single governmental decision having been taken without due process. All right, a lot of people will come in. Let me tell you, my oil companies produce 19% of the country's revenue. They float tenders all the time. I've been petroleum minister now for nearly 4 years. I was civil aviation minister for 2 years. I was the commerce and industry for 2 years. I was housing and urban affairs for 7 years, not once in my 8 years as a minister has there been even the slightest hint of suggestion coming from someone. What were those guys doing? They had something called telephone banking. And the most extreme manifestation was that some cashier in the Reserve Bank or somebody or some big bank got a call and money was given, and then people were given how contracts were awarded, and it showed the petroleum and natural gas sector was grounded because of wrong kinds of arrangements in it. That's why between 2006 and 16 it was a dull decade, nothing was done. So इनकी opposition की बातें सुनने पर मुझे तो हैरानगी अब इन्होंने वो भी करना बंद कर दिया, because they have repeatedly shown that they are quite happy to go to the same gentleman that they like to name and get something in one of their own states. So usko chodo. I don't think these are serious allegations. Baki, where is the opposition headed? That would be a good subject of discussion sometime.
Let me also ask you this, Mr. Puri, that since we spoke about this earlier, that you have been a civil servant also prior to donning this hat of yours, and at very senior positions, and therefore that would also entail you interacting closely with the prime ministers of the day. Tell me one thing. Now that 11 years you have worked with Mr. Modi as a minister in various capacities.
8 years with him as a minister, yeah.
And and in various capacities, as I said. What is the difference that you see in?
No, there is a total difference. There is a total difference. I mean, the difference is in the gene, in the persona. I have never come across someone who can travel 15 hours non-stop, get off the plane and go and visit the Parliament House, which is under construction. And he can come in a single car without security and spend 2 hours there. So I have this favorite story when I was called by my secretary, then secretary in I was Housing and Urban Affairs Minister. He said, ऐसी कुछ सुनाई दे रहा है कहीं पार्लियामेंट से कि माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी आना चाहेंगे. So I asked him one question, has anybody officially informed you? He said no. I said then you go on listening to the stories, because my position is that if the Prime Minister is coming on an announced trip, either this is not true, or if he's coming on an announced trip and he wants you to be there, he'll be there. But if he doesn't inform you, which means he doesn't want you to be there. So later, next day, when we found out that he came, one single car pulled up. How did they find out? That's an interesting story. There's the engineer in charge was called to ask where he was. So they asked him कि वो तो घर में पूजा है. But they asked क्यों पूजा में? He said नहीं वो कुछ visitor आना चाहेंगे. तो engineer being smart enough realized कि यार visitor आना चाहेंगे etc. So whatever it is, he was there. But he wasn't told it was the Prime Minister coming. But then people 2 and 2 became 22 and 222 after that. They all came to the conclusion ये तो PM का visit होगा, and it turned out to be so. He was there 2 hours there, inspected it after a 15-hour flight. And when I was told those things, so later on when Prime Minister went, my secretary called me and said कि लगता है आपको पहले इन्फॉर्मेशन थी. मैंने कहा मेरे को कहाँ से आ गई इन्फॉर्मेशन? सर आपने बनाने वो तो अकेला वहाँ जाना चाहते. ऐसा नहीं, वो देखना चाहते थे आप काम ठीक कर रहे हो कि नहीं. Anyway, so next morning, early in the morning, I was doing the rounds of in my garden, trying to get some exercise, and the PSO comes to me says आपके लिए call आया. That he would do only if it was somebody like the big boss. So Lakshmi was telling me तुम्हें डांट पड़ने वाली. मैंने क्यों? तो कल गए थे रात को कुछ ना कुछ गड़बड़ हुआ. Not even a reference to that. He was inquiring about something else early in the morning. So this is total work. I mean, I don't like to use the word workaholic, but complete life is dedicated to work and meeting objectives, etc. But more than that, I can't think of anyone who has his hands-on experience. We've had prime ministers, fair enough, those who had no experience because the times were different historically, they became state prime minister. There are others who came with some experience in the state, etc. But anyone who's been a chief minister, hands-on, so that is one. But more than all this, more than the hard work and the experience, is the vision. I mean, how many prime ministers have you come across who set a vision saying कि 2047 Viksit Bharat? I mean, he has a deep belief in it, And before he has a belief in it, we have a cabinet council of ministers meeting for 4 hours where we are looking at what to be done in the next 4 years out of this 5-year term in order to achieve that Viksit Bharat state. So there is a fundamental difference.
Surely, Mr. Puri, the fact that one of the criticisms of our policy and planning initially, earlier on, at least used to be that we don't have a long-term vision. So on that,
No, we don't have a vision, yeah.
At
We
least
didn't
the
have, no, I'm telling you, we didn't have a vision. And I'll be very blunt with you. It was Mr. Vajpayee who came as Prime Minister because he came from a party which had a world view, which had a view on India, and you were able to conduct the nuclear tests. Nuclear tests were spoken about in Narasimha Rao ji's time. They were spoken about earlier. What happened? You came under pressure or what happened, and you went, Vajpayee ji one day went and did the nuclear test. It completely changed the security situation.
Since we have come to security, I wanted to come to it a little later, but since we have come to it, Mr. Puri, let me also ask you one question. Since you have headed that UN Committee on Counterterrorism once in your own personal capacity, you yourself have headed that. Currently, we have a situation where Pakistan is going to be one of the chairs of the UN Special Committee. And
no, that's all baloney. That's all. It's all been rubbish being put out. That Pakistan has been elected vice chair of the 1973. अरे भाई देख तो लो क्या है यार ये देख तो लो. The 1973 or counter-terrorism committee was established in the aftermath of the terrorist actions in the United States. Traditionally, it has always been held by a permanent member of the Security Council. When India was elected to the Security Council in 2011 and 12, because of our fight against terrorism, we were the ones who were given. I was the chair of the counter-terrorism committee. I was the first Indian to be chair, and I was the chair. And we, in my tenure in 2012, we got the zero tolerance. Now to say Pakistan is vice chair, there's no significance.
I was coming to the point that the fact that you have the experience of dealing with it, I wanted to ask you something else. I want to ask you that India at this point in time, both through its actions in the military field and diplomatic field, has built a certain amount of momentum against Pakistan, and the world is...
We have built it on terrorism. Again, I said it again. And if Pakistan is the perpetrator of terrorism, which they are using it as a state policy. But if we had gone for Pakistan, the story would have been even more devastating. But we went for the terrorist haven. You went and hit Muridke and Bhavalpur. Earlier, because of the strategic restraint that you were exercising, nahi, घुस के वो थोड़ा सा वो करेंगे, choices, strategic restraint, क्या पक कर रहे हैं भाई? Today you've gone and shown that you can go in hundreds of kilometers inside Pakistani territory, Bahawalpur, Muridke, and the evidence of that, Nikun, the evidence of that is available in the public domain through commercially available sub-meter satellite imagery,
which we have been broadcasting. But
no, you don't have broadcasting. The world knows it. You have been, of course, yeah.
We have been broadcasting it. Now, let me ask you the question, Mr. Puri. What I want to ask you, since you have dealt with that position and since you have seen, as the permanent representative also, how the world operates, what is the change that you see in the international capitals, particularly the P5 capitals, because of this concerted push by the Modi government?
No, listen, you can't measure this. You can't measure this कि यहाँ से इतना पहुँचा, यहाँ से इतना बड़ा. But I think there is, in the last decade or so, that roughly coincides with the Modi period, people realize that you got economic strength which is on the rise, that your military capabilities, for a variety of factors, we already had a professional army, professional services, good domestic manufacturing, but that's all on the rise. Having said that, the international situation is determined by a large number of factors. You cannot predict twists and turns in major powers. You cannot do that. But today, India is not only able to hold its own, navigate through the global turbulence, whether it comes through on the energy front, but it comes in dealing with the big powers, whether it's dealing with the Americans or with the Russians or with the Chinese or anyone. It's a different India. But again, as you grow and you grow on the global stage, your leadership of the G20, it is strength in the making.
So that strength, Mr. Puri, do you think because of your background and the experience, I particularly ask you this question. Does it help us in dealing with this kind of vexed issues? Remember, terrorism is a vexed issue and globally governments have dealt with it.
ये terrorism के बारे में आपको बात बताऊं. The narrative on terrorism is one of the most fascinating in terms of what is said. On the one hand, you will say terrorist is one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That's a lot of BS. Today's terrorist does something, if they kill innocent civilian, they take away the most fundamental right of all, the right to life. And it's one thing for you to say, oh, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. But when it hits you, then you decide what happened. Look at the response of the countries which have been hit by terrorism and what they've done. I mean, whether they went too far or not, I don't know. But I think the Indian position is a very well considered and a well anchored one. Where there is change in the Indian position on terrorism, earlier, well, if you had a strike in one place, you would go and hit one target on the other side. This is not that. In 22 minutes, you got nine major targets, okay, which was all related to terrorism. If you wanted to do something else, you could have done it. You have the power. I mean, there were people in our system who were, literally waiting to be allowed to do that. So I think there's a lot of fake narrative out there about what happened, what didn't happen. Remember, the devastation those 22 minutes caused, visual documentation is available through commercially available studies. It's not pictures you have put out or some other channel. These are pictures put out by a satellite imagery firm. Where is India going? The India under Modi has shown where it has come from, a $2 trillion economy to $4 trillion, taking the benefits of development down to the grassroots, and not only able to defend itself, but I think Operation Sindoor presents a new template on which we will use in our interaction, and I think the message is loud and clear to our neighborhood also. So I see in the coming period, you asked me a question in my personal capacity, a lot of readjustment will take place. And a lot of people who were earlier in the think that they will get away with maverick behavior, there will be reconsideration of their own ability to take reckless action.
And let me ask you something, Mr. Puri, out of all of this, we have spoken about Mr. Modi's leadership and 11 years in power and everything else. There's also a certain amount of domestic politics that plays out around.
If you are the world's largest democracy, how can you leave the domestic politics out of it?
I'm glad.
I mean, it wouldn't be fun also, it would be very boring.
Tell me, Mr. Puri, yesterday we saw a very sad incident playing out in Bangalore.
Very sad.
Very sad. I mean, do you think, your party has actually come out all guns blazing?
No, I've seen the statements by the party, but more than, I totally agree with the criticism that the BJP has leveled against that state government. I come from an old school where one life lost is one life too many. And this is innocent people. You didn't plan it. Now you're trying to pass the blame on to someone else. It's not very clear whether you had, what advice were you given. In fact, the uniformed people had also turned around and said that they'd advised against holding it without adequate preparation. But it's very sad. But I think people should learn a lesson, and especially I think the state governments from that political party, I see a lot of, they're not able to govern.
I see you being coy in naming...
I know the Congress party, BJP, Congress party, what they're doing in Karnataka, but this is only a tragedy. This is a tragedy. Some of the other stuff that they've been doing are equally wrong. But even in the Himachal government, I don't know what. OPD, now you need to pay to go to a OPD in a hospital. Unbelievable.
And tell me, Mr. Puri, the action that has been taken there, suspension, since you are a former citizen.
I've just seen it on your screen, and I think that this is one of those knee-jerk, quick things ki kisi ko blame kar do isme or try and get away with it.
And you think that probably a deeper introspection on part of the state government?
I'll tell you something about India. Whenever something like this happens, you will be very clear that the truth will come out. You can't get away with this. And then blaming wahan pe bhi hua tha. What kind of nonsense is this? This, they'll have to pay a price for this.
On that note, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.